The February cold hits differently in Calgary. Not just cold. It gets into your bones, into the back of your throat, into the spaces between your thoughts when you're tired enough. And I was always tired those days. I pulled my coat tighter and pushed through the glass door of St. Bridget's Memorial, the warmth of the hospital lobby hitting me like a wall. The overnight shift started at 11. I had 4 minutes. My name is Sarah. I'm a registered nurse on the cardiac care floor. And, on most Tuesday nights, that means monitoring vitals, updating charts, and eating a granola bar, standing up at the nurse's station, because there isn't time to sit down. It's not glamorous. But it pays the rent on my apartment in Kensington. Barely. And it keeps my daughter, Maisie, in gymnastics and winter boots that actually fit. Maisie was 6. She had my hair in her father's eyes, which was unfortunate, because every time she looked up at me with those gray eyes, I felt something crack open in my chest, and then immediately seal back shut. A trick the body learns when it has no choice. Her father's name was Luca. I hadn't said that name out loud in almost 5 years. The cardiac unit was quiet when I clocked in. My colleague Sandra was wrapping up her notes at the desk, and she gave me the look she always gave me, half sympathy, half admiration, before handing over the chart rundown. 3 stable patients, 1 post-op from an angioplasty, 1 new admission in room 14. New one came in around 8, Sandra said, capping her pen. Private admit, Dr. Osi handled intake. Vitals are stable, but he took a hard hit. Car accident on Deerfoot. Possible mild concussion, bruised ribs, some soft tissue in the shoulder. She paused. His assistant was here for about 2 hours. Very intense. Intense how? You know. Suits, earpieces, the kind of intense. I looked at the chart. Caucasian male, 34, no listed next of kin. Emergency contact. A company called Harrow and Vale Group. I didn't think anything of it. I took the chart and went to do rounds. Room 14 was at the end of the hall. The light was dim when I pushed the door open. Standard vitals check, nothing that needed to wake him. I moved quietly, the way you learn to move after years of night shifts, and reached for the monitor display. That's when he shifted. And I froze, because I knew that profile. I knew the angle of that jaw. I knew the way his brow drew together even in sleep, like he was calculating something. I had spent 2 years memorizing every detail of that face, and then another 5 years trying to forget it. Luca Harrow. My hands didn't shake. I'm proud of that. My nursing training kicked in the way it always does. The body keeps working even when the mind goes completely offline. I checked his oxygen saturation. I noted his heart rate. I adjusted the blanket that had slipped off his shoulder, because it was the professional thing to do and also because I needed something to do with my hands. Then I walked back out into the hallway, stood against the wall next to the supply room, and took 3 very slow breaths. He was here, in my hospital, in my unit. Luca Harrow, who had left Calgary on a Tuesday morning in April 5 years ago, told me he needed to go back to Toronto for a few weeks to sort out something with his family's company, kissed me on the forehead, and never came back. 3 weeks became 2 months of short phone calls that got shorter. 2 months became a conversation where he said things like, "I don't want to hold you back," and "This isn't fair to you," and "I care about you too much to do this." I had cried. I had asked him not to. He had been very gentle and very certain, and then he was gone. I found out I was pregnant 6 weeks later. I made a decision, and I have never once regretted it. Maisie is the best thing in my life. She is funny and loud, and she can do a cartwheel on command, and she makes friends with every dog she meets on the street. She is entirely worth everything, but Luca didn't know about her. I had picked up the phone to call him so many times in those early months, and every time I thought about how certain he'd sounded, how clean he'd made the break. I was 28, alone, and terrified, and I couldn't bear the thought of him coming back out of obligation, staying out of guilt, building some half-life version of a family out of duty. Maisie deserved more than that. I deserved more than that. So I hadn't called. I went back to room 14 at the end of the hour, the way I was supposed to. Professional. Measured. He was awake. He was lying with his head turned toward the window, watching the snow coming down outside, and when I came in, he turned to look at me. The thing about a concussion is that it doesn't necessarily slow cognition, it disrupts it. His eyes were clear, then confused, then something happened in them that I can't quite describe. like a man watching a word form that he recognizes but can't place. "Hi," I said. My voice came out steady. "I'm your nurse tonight. I'm just going to check your blood pressure." He watched me wrap the cuff around his arm. His gaze was tracking my face with an intensity that made my skin feel electric, and not in a good way. This is happening, and I cannot stop it way. "Sierra," he said. Not a question. I pressed the button on the monitor. "Your BP looks good. How's the pain level?" "Scale of 1 to 10, Sarah." He said it again, like testing whether the word was real. "You work here." "I do." I peeled the cuff off and made a note on the tablet. "You should try to rest. You've had a significant..." "How long?" "I'm sorry? How long have you worked here?" I looked at him then. Really looked at him, for the first time since walking into this room. He looked older. Of course he did. We all did. But it wasn't a bad older. There were lines at the corners of his eyes. His shoulders were broader. The boy I'd loved was still somewhere in there, but he was buried under something harder, something careful. 6 years, I said. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that information somewhere. "I didn't know you were in Calgary." "I never left." Something moved across his face. "Right," he said quietly. "Right." I finished my checks and left. For the next 3 hours, I did everything a nurse is supposed to do on a night shift. I was competent and calm, and I did not think about the man in room 14. This is something I've gotten very good at. The ability to seal off one part of my mind while the rest of it keeps functioning. Single parenthood teaches you that. You learn to grieve things on a schedule. At 2 a.m., his call light came on. I considered sending my colleague Devon. I considered it for about 4 seconds, and then I went myself because I am apparently a person who cannot leave well enough alone. He was sitting up in bed, which he wasn't supposed to be doing, with bruised ribs, and he looked like he'd been awake for the full 3 hours. "You're going to hurt yourself," I said. "I need to ask you something. You need to lie back down." "Sarah." The way he said my name was different now. More deliberate. There was something under it. Not urgency exactly. But weight. The kind of weight a person carries when they've been waiting to put something down. "I owe you an explanation. You owe me nothing. We were together a long time ago." "Lie down. My father was being investigated." He said it quickly, like he'd been rehearsing, and was afraid of losing his nerve. "When I went back to Toronto, the company, my father had made some decisions that were not legal, and there were people who were watching everyone connected to him. I was told, very specifically told, that anyone I was close to could be looked at, targeted, used. I didn't say anything. I didn't handle it the right way," he said. "I know that. I was 29 and I was scared. And I thought that if I made a clean cut, if I disappeared from your life, you'd be safer. I convinced myself that's what it was, that I was protecting you." He stopped. "But I think I was also a coward, and I'm sorry. I've been sorry for a long time." The monitor beeped softly. Outside the window, the snow was still falling. "Luca," I said carefully. "I appreciate that. I do, but it's been 5 years. You don't need to. I came to Calgary on purpose. That stopped me. The accident was an accident," he added quickly. "That part wasn't planned. But I've been considering relocating Harrow and Vale's Western operations here for 8 months. And I knew you were here. And I kept telling myself that was a coincidence, that it didn't factor into the decision, and He stopped again, pressed his lips together. "I'm not good at this. I never was." "No," I agreed. "You weren't." The ghost of something passed over his face, almost a smile. "You always said exactly what you thought. I learned to stop softening things." He looked at me for a long moment. "You seem different," he said. "Not a criticism. Just an observation, the way you'd note a change in weather." "People change in 5 years," I said. "What changed for you?" I thought about Maisie asleep at home, her gymnastics bag by the door, the drawing she'd made for me this week taped above my bathroom mirror, a purple house with a yellow sun, and 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, both of them with enormous smiling mouths. "I grew up," I said. "Get some sleep." I left before he could ask anything else. By morning, the snow had stopped. I finished my charts, drank bad coffee from the machine on the 2nd floor, and sat in the break room for 15 minutes before my shift ended. Sandra came in and poured herself a tea and sat across from me without asking if I wanted company. "The guy in room 14, she said. He's asking for you. He can ask for whoever's on day shift. She looked at me over her mug. You know him. It wasn't a question. Sandra had been a nurse for 19 years. She knew everything. A long time ago, I said. Is it complicated? I thought about how to answer that. Complicated implied that the situation was unclear, that the edges were blurry, that reasonable people could interpret it different ways. What I had with Luca was not complicated in that sense. It was very clear. He had left. I had built a life. He had come back, accidentally, and then not so accidentally. And somewhere in a pediatric wing across town, my daughter was about to start her day at school, not knowing that the person who gave her those gray eyes was lying in a hospital bed 3 kilometers away. Yes, I said. It's complicated. Maisie had a half day on Fridays, which meant my neighbor Helen picked her up from school, while I slept after night shifts. I got home at 8:30, and by the time Helen brought Maisie home at noon, I had slept 4 hours and was functioning at around 60%, which was normal for Fridays. Maisie threw her backpack at the door and came to find me at the kitchen table with my coffee. We made volcanoes, she announced. Mine exploded the most. Did it get on Mrs. Patterson? A little bit. Maisie? She laughed. She thought it was funny. She climbed into the chair across from me and propped her chin in her hands, watching me the way she sometimes did, serious and observant, like a small scientist studying a specimen. Mama, are you sad? I'm tired. Your eyes look sad. They're different from tired. 6 years old and already she could tell. I looked at my coffee. I had a hard night at work. Did someone die? No, baby. Nobody died. Okay. She seemed satisfied with this. Can we have pancakes for dinner? We can have pancakes for dinner. She slid off the chair and went to get her gymnastics bag because she had practice at 4, and I sat at the kitchen table and thought about what I was going to do. Luca was going to be in the hospital for at least 3 more days. I worked tonight and tomorrow night. I could request a reassignment. Devon could take the floor. It wasn't unusual. But that felt like running, and I had spent the last 5 years not running. I had stayed in Calgary. I had made a life here, a real one, with Maisie and Helen next door, and the apartment I was slowly paying off, and the night shifts and the bad coffee, and the morning light coming through the window, while my daughter told me about exploding volcanoes. I hadn't run, but Luca didn't know about Maisie, and now he was here, in my hospital, in my city, and that was a fact that had an expiry date. Eventually the calculation would happen. He'd ask, or he'd notice something, or the universe would simply arrange things the way it always had. The question was whether I let it happen to me, or whether I chose. I thought about what one of my nursing school instructors had told me once, in a lecture, about patient advocacy. She said, "The hardest part isn't knowing the right thing. It's deciding to do it before circumstances force you to." I went back to work that night. He was awake when I came in for his evening check, sitting up more carefully than the night before. Someone had told him about the ribs. He had a laptop open, but he closed it when I came in. That small gesture, the laptop closing, the full attention, it was so characteristically him that it made my chest hurt in a way I hadn't expected. "How's the pain?" I asked. "Manageable." He watched me run through the routine. "I didn't know if you'd be assigned to me again." "I could have requested a different floor," I said. "I didn't." "Why?" I set down the tablet. I had been thinking about this all day and through the pancake dinner and Maisie's gymnastics and the bath and the bedtime story, through the drive to the hospital and the locker room and the 4 minutes before shift start. "Because I have something to tell you," I said, "and I've been not telling you for 5 years, which means I've been making a decision that isn't entirely mine to make." He went very still. "I have a daughter," I said. "Her name is Maisie. She's 6. My voice did something small and involuntary, and I stopped, and then I continued. "She has your eyes, the exact color. I've always found that very inconvenient." The silence in the room was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Luca's face went through something I won't try to describe too, precisely, because I don't think I have the words for it. It wasn't the shock I'd expected. Or it was. But underneath the shock, there was something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. Like a part of him had always been waiting, in the way we wait for things we don't know we're waiting for. "Maisie," he said, like he was trying the name in his mouth. "She's healthy," I said. She's funny and very loud, and she's excellent at gymnastics, and she makes friends with every dog she meets. She's the best person I know." He looked at the window. The Calgary skyline was dark outside, the lights of downtown reflected in the cloud cover above. "You didn't call," he said. It wasn't an accusation, more like an equation he was working out. "No. Because I left the way I left. Because I couldn't ask you to come back for the wrong reasons." I pulled the chair beside his bed and sat down, which was not something I typically did during rounds, but this was not a typical round. If you'd come back because you felt you had to, and stayed because you felt you had to, and built some version of fatherhood out of obligation, that wouldn't have been good for her, and it wouldn't have been real. He was quiet for a long time. "She doesn't know about me," he said. "She knows she has a father who wasn't able to be with us. She's 6. That's what 6 needs to know." Another long pause. "What does 34 need to know?" he asked. And there it was. The thing I'd spent 5 years afraid of, the question I'd imagined 1,000 ways. And when it finally came, it was quieter than I'd expected. Less like a confrontation, more like a door. "That it's not too late," I said. "Maisie's 6, not 16. There's still time. But it would have to be real. Not obligation, not guilt. If you do this, you do it because you want to know her, actually know her. Who she is, what she likes, what makes her laugh." I looked at him steadily. "I will not let her get attached to someone who disappears again." He held my gaze. "That's fair," he said. "I know it is." He was quiet for another moment, and then, "She makes friends with every dog she meets." Something softened in me, just slightly. Every single one. It's embarrassing, honestly. She once made us stand in the rain for 10 minutes so she could pet a golden retriever. The thing that happened to his face then, I wasn't sure what to call it. It was careful and raw and wondering all at once. It looked like the beginning of something. Or maybe the resumption of something that had been interrupted too early and left unfinished in the way that only the important things are ever left. "I'd like to meet her," he said. "When you think she's ready, when you think it's right, I'm not going anywhere." Outside the window, the snow had started again, the way it does in Calgary in February. Without warning, without asking, as though the city simply decided. I stood up. I picked up the tablet and made my note. Vitals stable. Patient resting comfortably. "Get some sleep," I said. And this time, when I left the room, I didn't feel like I was running from anything.